An old man stumbled upon a heartbreaking scene in the freezing woods, a mother dog tied to a tree, starving, trembling, yet shielding her helpless pups. He thought it was tragedy, but what happened next was nothing short of a miracle, one that changed his life forever. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The old man lived on the edge of a quiet village where winters were long and harsh. His days passed in solitude, gathering firewood, tending to his small cabin, and surviving on the little he had. Life had made him resilient, but also lonely. His family gone, his friends distant memories. He often walked through the forest trails, not for pleasure, but because they reminded him he was still alive. Each crunch of snow beneath his boots echoed his isolation. To the villagers, he was just the old man with nothing left. Yet, in his heart, he carried faith that God always had a plan. He just never expected that plan to arrive in such an unexpected form. On that freezing afternoon, as the old man trudged home with numb fingers and aching joints, a faint sound carried through the icy wind. At first, he thought it was the cry of some wild creature, but the noise persisted, soft, desperate whimpers that pulled at his heart. Curious, he followed the sound deeper into the woods until he stumbled upon a sight that made him stop in. His tracks. A large German shepherd was tied tightly to a tree, the coarse rope cutting into her fur. Her sides heaved with exhaustion, patches of blood visible against her coat. Yet, despite her pain, she crouched protectively over 3 tiny pups, shielding them from the biting cold. The old man's chest tightened. Who could be so cruel as to abandon her like this? The dog raised her weary eyes toward him, torn between fear and a fragile hope. She let out a low growl, but it was weak, almost pleading. Kneeling slowly, he whispered, "Easy now, girl. I won't hurt you." The pups whimpered louder, their little bodies trembling. In that moment, he realized this was no ordinary encounter. Destiny had led him here, for reasons far greater than he yet understood. The old man stayed crouched in the snow, careful not to make any sudden moves. The mother dog's body trembled, her eyes fixed on him with a mixture of fear and defiance. Every instinct in her screamed to protect her pups, even if it meant using the last of her strength. He could feel her conflict, torn between lashing out and surrendering to the stranger who might be her only chance. The pups whined softly, their tiny heads lifting from beneath her body, their innocent eyes reflecting both hunger and hope. One of them dared to crawl forward, collapsing in the snow just inches from his boot. The old man's throat tightened. He extended a hand slowly, whispering words of comfort. The dog growled faintly but didn't strike. Something in his voice seemed to calm her, if only for a moment. Still, memories of the villagers' warnings filled his mind. They often said strays carried danger, that helping them would only bring trouble. But looking at the fragile lives shivering before him, he couldn't turn away. His heart, hardened by years of loneliness, now ached with compassion. He knew one thing. If he walked away, these creatures would not survive the night. With trembling hands, the old man reached for the knot binding the dog to the tree. The rope was frozen stiff, biting into her flesh. She flinched as he tugged at it, but instead of snapping, she simply lowered her head, as though surrendering to his mercy. Finally, with one last pull, the rope came free. The dog staggered forward but didn't run. She leaned weakly against the tree, too exhausted to move. The old man quickly scooped the pups into his worn coat, tucking them close to his chest for warmth. Their tiny bodies shivered, but against his heartbeat, they began to calm. "Come on, girl," he urged softly. He gestured for the mother to follow. For a moment she hesitated, glancing at her pups hidden in his coat. Then, with a faint whine, she limped after him. The snow was deep, the wind relentless. Each step back toward his cabin was a battle. The old man's joints burned, and his breath came in ragged bursts. More than once, he nearly stumbled, clutching the fragile pups tighter. Behind him, the dog struggled but pushed on, guided by something stronger than pain: hope. When they finally reached the edge of the village, skeptical eyes watched. Neighbors muttered warnings, shaking their heads. But the old man didn't. Listen, he had already made his choice. These lives now depended on him, and he would not abandon them. The days that followed were not easy. The old man tended to the mother dog with the same care he once gave his own children. He cleaned her wounds, fed her scraps from his kitchen, and laid blankets near the fire so she and her pups could rest in warmth. At first, she kept her distance, watching him cautiously. But each day, her growls softened into quiet sighs, and her tired eyes began to trust. The pups, however, wasted no time. They tumbled around his cabin, squeaking and yelping, bringing laughter he hadn't heard in years. Their tiny paws pattering against the wooden floor filled the silence that had haunted his home for so long. For the first time in decades, the cabin felt alive. One stormy night, the old man awoke to the sound of frantic barking. The mother dog stood by the door, ears pinned back, alert. Confused, he followed her outside and froze. A heavy branch had fallen dangerously close to the cabin, threatening to collapse part of the roof. Had she not warned him, he might never have woken in time. He looked at her, breathless, realizing this encounter was no accident. She had come into his life not only to be saved, but to save him too. What began as an act of compassion had turned into something far greater, a blessing he never expected, a miracle wrapped in fur and loyalty. As winter slowly gave way to spring, the old man's cabin was no longer silent. Laughter, barking, and the playful cries of pups filled every corner. The man, once known in the village as a lonely soul, now walked with a new light in his eyes. Neighbors who had doubted him began to notice the change. They saw how the dog followed him everywhere, loyal and protective. They saw how the pups grew strong, chasing one another through the fields. The old man himself seemed reborn, his shoulders straighter, his steps firmer, his spirit renewed. One evening, he sat on his porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in gold and crimson. The mother dog rested beside him, her pups curled at his feet. Stroking her fur gently, he whispered, "You weren't abandoned, you were sent." Tears filled his eyes, not from sorrow, but from gratitude. For the first time in many years, he felt truly blessed. God had not forgotten him. The miracle wasn't just the lives he had saved, it was the love that had saved him in return.